What if I told you that this is not chili? I know what you're thinking. It says chili on the menu. It looks like chili. There's a pot of something brown and spiced simmering in a kitchen on Vine Street. But what you're actually looking at is a Mediterranean meat sauce built from a Macedonian family recipe, seasoned with cinnamon and cloves and allspice, served over a pile of spaghetti, buried under a quarter-pound of finely shredded cheddar, and eaten with oyster crackers on the side. Cincinnati called it chili. The rest of the country lost its mind. Cincinnati did not care. That's Cincinnati. A city that takes what it has, bends the rules of what something is supposed to be, and then refuses to apologize for it. German immigrants, Greek immigrants, tight budgets, cold winters, and a stubborn refusal to waste a single scrap. 10 foods. One city that perfected the art of making do, and turning making do into something the world can't stop talking about. Food 1. Cincinnati chili. It's 1922. Two brothers, Tom and John Karajev, have fled the Balkans after the fallout from World War I, ethnic violence, and the collapse of the Ottoman Empire. They land in Cincinnati and open a small food stand inside the Empress Burlesque Theater on Vine Street. They are selling their family's meat sauce. Back home in Macedonia, this sauce, called salsa kima, was served over pasta, seasoned with cinnamon, cloves, allspice, and warm holiday spices that no Texan would recognize as chili ingredients. But in Cincinnati, with a new customer base to feed and a budget stretched tight, they pour it over spaghetti and call it chili. Nobody expected what happened next. The sauce was thin, almost soup-like, designed to soak into the noodles beneath it. A little bit of spiced meat became a full meal. For a dime. A three-way, spaghetti, chili, cheese, was born from pure economic logic. A four-way adds onions or beans. A five-way adds both. The Karajev brothers weren't reinventing cuisine. They were feeding people cheaply, using what they knew, making it stretch as far as possible. Today, there are over 250 chili parlors in the Cincinnati metro area. Skyline Chili, founded by another Greek immigrant in 1949, has more locations in Ohio than there are Taco Bells. Camp Washington. Chili won a James Beard Foundation America's Classics Award. The Smithsonian named it one of the 20 most iconic food destinations in America. The rest of the country will never stop debating whether it's real chili. Cincinnati doesn't need that conversation to be settled. Food 2. Goetta. Say it right, get-a. It's the mid-1800s. German immigrants are flooding into Cincinnati. So many that the neighborhood they build, over the Rhine, becomes the largest German-speaking community outside of Germany itself. They bring their food traditions with them. Specifically, a peasant tradition from northwestern Germany. Grützwurst, a sausage made from whatever meat scraps the butcher didn't want, mixed with grain to bulk it up and make it stretch further. Germans have a phrase for food like this: arm Leute essen, poor people's food. In Cincinnati, they adapt it. The grain back home was buckwheat or rye. In Ohio, oats are abundant and cheap. So they use steel-cut oats, pinhead oats, coarse and chewy, and mix them with ground pork and beef, onions, and a blend of spices, cinnamon, cloves, mace, marjoram. They simmer it for hours, pour it into loaf pans, let it set overnight, slice it thin, and fry it in a cast iron skillet until the outside shatters and the inside stays creamy. That's Goetta. The oats are the stretch. A small amount of meat becomes a full breakfast serving because the oats absorb everything, bind everything, give it that texture that's unlike any other breakfast meat in America. Glier's Goetta, founded in 1946, now produces over 1 million pounds of Goetta a year. 99% of it is consumed within Greater Cincinnati. Drive 30 miles in any direction from the city and you cannot find it. The Germans of Over the Rhine created something so specific to their place and their budget that it has never needed to leave. Cincinnati calls it Cincinnati caviar. The city means it. Food 3. Graeter's ice cream. French pot method. Not every Cincinnati food was born from poverty. Some were born from stubbornness. Louis Charles Graeter started selling ice cream off a cart on the streets of Cincinnati in 1870, 9 years before the light bulb was invented. He used the French pot method, a small cylindrical metal bowl spinning inside a larger bowl packed with ice and salt, producing ice cream in 2.5-gallon batches. Small, slow, labor-intensive. Barely 20% air compared to 50% in commercial ice cream. Dense. Heavy. A pint weighs close to a pound. By the 1920s, every other ice cream company in America had switched to mass production. More air, more volume, lower cost. When Lewis died and left the business to his widow Regina, she was offered the same option. She said no. She kept making ice cream the slow way, in tiny batches, by hand, because it tasted better. Here's the move that made Graeter's famous. When Wilmer Graeter accidentally poured liquid chocolate directly into a spinning pot of ice cream, it froze on contact and got broken up by the churning paddle. The result was chocolate chips the size of a quarter, sometimes bigger. You don't find a chip in Graeter's ice cream. You excavate one. Regina opened 20 stores across Cincinnati. She did this during the Great Depression, as a widowed woman running a company at a time when women were not expected to do either. She never switched to the cheaper process. She never compromised the product. Oprah Winfrey called Graeter's the best ice cream she had ever tasted. The next day, the company shipped 400 boxes, 10 times their normal daily volume. Ben Cohen of Ben & Jerry's named it one of the top 10 ice cream companies in the country. Graeter's is still the only commercial ice cream manufacturer anywhere in the world using French pot freezers. Regina's stubbornness became the entire brand. 4 generations later. Food 4. The cheese coney. Same kitchen as the chili. Same pot. Different vehicle. The Karajieff brothers at Empress weren't just selling spaghetti. They were also selling hot dogs, and topping them with the same Macedonian meat sauce they poured over pasta. The cheese coney was born from the same logic as the three-way. 1 pot of chili, maximum possible meals. The standard coney gets mustard, onions, and that blizzard of finely shredded cheddar. Not grated, not sliced. Shredded so fine it almost floats on top of the sauce before you press it down with a spoon. Locals say it has to be Skyline. And the chili has to be the right consistency. Thin, almost like a sauce, because it's supposed to soak in. A 20-cent hot dog becomes a 5-star experience through the logic of the stretch. The cheese coney and the three-way are the twin peaks of Cincinnati's culinary identity. Order one or the other at any chili parlor, and the only acceptable follow-up question is, what way? There is no wrong answer. There is only your answer. Food 5. LaRosa's Pizza. It's 1954. Buddy LaRosa is asked to make pizzas for a Catholic church fundraiser on Cincinnati's west side. He uses his Aunt Dina's recipe. The pizzas sell out immediately. He uses it again. They sell out again. What makes LaRosa's distinct is the sauce. Sweet, almost jammy, brighter than New York, lighter than Chicago, applied generously all the way to the edge. The cheese is provolone instead of mozzarella, which gives it a sharper Tangier pull. The crust is soft but substantial. It is a whole different pie, built on an Italian-American family's secret and scaled from a church basement into a regional empire. Today, there are nearly 100 LaRosa's locations across Ohio, Kentucky, and Indiana. Despite being surrounded by national chains with enormous marketing budgets, Domino's, Pizza Hut, Papa John's, LaRosa's consistently outsells all of them in the Cincinnati metro area. A church fundraiser recipe, an immigrant family's tomato sauce, stretched across a region for 70 years. Aunt Dina would be stunned. Food 6. The Montgomery Inn rib sauce. It's 1951. Ted and Matula Gregory take over a small roadside restaurant in Montgomery, a Cincinnati suburb, and start serving ribs. Ted becomes known as the Rib King. But the real story is Matula's sauce. Montgomery Inn barbecue sauce is sweeter than traditional Southern barbecue, more tomato-forward, with something almost dessert-like underneath it. A hint that makes you reach for another rib before you finish the one in your hand. It became so famous that Bob Hope had the ribs flown to his home in California. Elizabeth Taylor ate at Montgomery Inn. Ronald Reagan. Elton John. What does sauce have to do with the idea of stretching what you have? Everything. In barbecue, the sauce is the great equalizer. It transforms cheap, tough cuts of meat, ribs are working man's food, into something transcendent. Matula Gregory made ribs world-class food through one proprietary recipe that she never fully disclosed. The sauce is the stretch. The idea of one family's formula turning a suburban Cincinnati restaurant into a national legend is as Cincinnati as anything on this list. Food 7. Aglamesis Brothers. Opera creams. Cincinnati gets a lot of credit for the chili, not enough credit for the chocolate. The Aglamesis brothers, Thomas and James, Greek immigrants, opened their candy shop in Cincinnati in 1908. They made their ice cream the French egg custard way, sweetened with honey. And they made their chocolates entirely by hand, including their signature, the opera cream. An opera cream is a dome of smooth, sweet vanilla fondant, sometimes flavored with rum or coffee, encased in a thin shell of dark chocolate. It is lighter than a truffle, silkier. The cream center melts first, then the chocolate shell follows. Two textures, one bite, and it takes a skilled hand to get the balance exactly right. The Aglamesis shop is still open on Madison Road in Cincinnati, still family-owned, still hand-dipping every piece. Another Greek immigrant family that landed in Cincinnati and turned their craft into a legacy that has lasted over a century. Just like the chili parlors, they stretched it across generations instead of across square footage. The building is the same. The recipe is the same. That is the Cincinnati way. Food 8. Skyline Chili's secret recipe. This is less about one dish and more about one of the great culinary mysteries of the American Midwest. Nicholas Lambrinides, a short-time employee of Empress Chili, opened Skyline in 1949 after returning from his stint there. He named it for the view of the Cincinnati skyline from the original restaurant on Price Hill. He took what he knew about the Empress formula and made it his own. The result is subtly but decisively different from every other Cincinnati chili parlor in the city. And the exact recipe has been a closely guarded secret for over 75 years. What everyone agrees on: cinnamon, allspice, cumin, chili powder, and something else. Chocolate. The company denies it. Worcestershire? Some historians think so. Oregano? Maybe. Dozens of attempts to reverse engineer the formula have produced things that taste close but not identical. The secret is in the ratios, the order, the temperature, the timing. And Skyline isn't talking. More than 150 locations in 4 states. Thousands of employees who have made it for decades. And the original formula remains intact. Some things in Cincinnati are meant to stay exactly where they started. Food 9. Tom+Chee's grilled cheese donut. We have to talk about this. It's 2009. True Quackenbush and Corey Ward set up a food tent at Cincinnati's Fountain Square with a simple concept: gourmet grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup. The tent became a pop-up. The pop-up became a restaurant. And somewhere in the process, someone had the idea to use a glazed donut as the bread. The sweet glaze, the salty cheese, the butter-crisped exterior that is somehow also a pastry. This is not supposed to work. It works. Tom+Chee took the grilled cheese donut to ABC's Shark Tank and walked away with a deal. The concept went national. Multiple chains opened across the country. It started at a food tent in Cincinnati because someone decided the rules about what bread is supposed to be were optional. The stretch isn't always about poverty. Sometimes it's about possibility. What happens if we take this thing and stretch it into something it was never supposed to be? Cincinnati discovered the answer is a grilled cheese donut, and somehow that is exactly right for this city. Food 10. The Cincinnati Mett, Cincinnati-style sausage. This one almost nobody outside Cincinnati has ever heard of. A Cincinnati Mett is a coarsely ground, unsmoked pork sausage, raw or very lightly cooked depending on where you get it. The grind is intentionally rough, chunky. You can see the texture. The flavor is pork-forward, lightly seasoned with no smoke, no heavy curing, just meat and spice and the skill of the butcher. Avril Blay and Sons on Freeman Avenue has been making Metts in Cincinnati since 1894, over 130 years. The Mett has never become a national phenomenon. It has never gotten a Shark Tank deal or a viral food moment. It just stayed in Cincinnati, in the same butcher cases, feeding the same neighborhoods, showing up at the same cookouts in the same Reds tailgates, in the same rough ground, quietly excellent form. And that might be the purest expression of the Cincinnati food philosophy on this entire list. Not growing it, not expanding it, not selling it to a chain, just sustaining it. making sure the tradition survives another generation, making sure that in 2050, someone on Freeman Avenue can walk into a butcher shop that has been there since before the automobile existed and buy a mett the same way their great-grandparents did. Cincinnati didn't invent the idea of making do, but it perfected the art of turning making do into something worth celebrating.